Food packaging. Is it just for protection, or is there more to it? This is what we'll be trying to answer in this webinar. So I am Lucy Geert, Scientific Project Manager at ILSI Europe, and I'm delighted and very proud to welcome you today to this webinar. And this webinar is the first one of a series organized by ILSI Europe. And indeed, at ILSI Europe, we bring together relevant stakeholders to reach evidence-based consensus on scientific issues of common concern. And how do we achieve this? By doing 4 things. We foster collaboration between relevant stakeholders from academia, industry, public sector, and civil societies. We identify common existing and emerging challenges in food, nutrition, sustainability, and health. We deliver science-based solutions of the highest quality and integrity. And we communicate and disseminate our scientific output widely. ILSI Europe is also part of the wider ILSI network, with 17 branches throughout the world. ILSI is a non-profit worldwide organization whose mission is to provide science that improves human health and well-being and safeguards the environment. I have today the pleasure to moderate this webinar, and I'm very happy now to introduce you to our 3 fantastic speakers of today. First, we'll have Professor Anne Vermeulen, who is a postdoctoral researcher at Ghent University in Belgium in the research group of food microbiology and food preservation, where she is focusing on industrial projects related to food spoilage and food safety. She is also co-leading the service laboratory supporting more than 75 food companies in their innovations and daily challenges on food safety and stability. Since 2017, she is also professor at the University of Hasselt in Belgium, teaching on food processing and preservation. Professor Peter Ragaert is professor of food packaging technology at the Department of Food Technology, Safety and Health at Ghent University, and he focuses on bioplastics, active and intelligent packaging, and barrier materials. One of the key elements in his research is relating different compositions and functionalization of packaging materials with resulting shelf life of food products. Together, they both leading the organization of Pack for Food, which was founded in 2005. Pack for Food aims to stimulate innovation in food packaging, in which the focus in the last years has been shifting to packaging materials in a circular economy. And last but not least, Dr. Thomas Gude, who is the deputy head of SQTS in Switzerland. After studying food chemistry in Germany, followed by a PhD in the area of veterinary drugs at the Federal Health Service in Berlin, he has been working for an European reference laboratory and for more than 10 years in pharmaceutical and chemical industry, in various research and development positions. Since 15 years, he is now working for SQTS, responsible for the food and non-food testing laboratories. In addition, he is giving plenty of lectures at several institutions, universities, and he is also chairing ILSI Europe's Packaging Materials Task Force. Now a few notes about the practical organization of this webinar. So there will be time for some questions after each talk and a general Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So you have the possibility as participants to ask any question you may have during the webinar by using the question box at the right side of your screen. When typing your question, we will be grateful if you could indicate the initials of the speaker to whom your question is addressed to. Please also note that this webinar will be registered and would be available for the participants afterwards. And now it's up to you. So we would be happy for you to indicate your answer to the following poll. You have still 10 seconds left to vote. Thank you all for voting. Now we see the results of the poll. And now I give the floor to Anne Vermeulen for her presentation. Thank you, Anne.
Okay, I hope everybody can see my presentation now. Thank you very much, Lucy, for the nice introduction. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give here a talk today for Pack for Food on functionality, convenience, and sustainable food packaging. So the vision of Pack for Food is that we want to improve food packaging, and in our opinion, this can be done by a customized, optimized packaging. And this is also.
I'm sorry to stop, but we don't see your screen, unfortunately.
I was afraid so, but I didn't got a message to share.
No problem, no worries. So at least you are all ensured that we are doing this webinar in live conditions. Okay, and you're the presenter, you can now share your screen, please. Here it is, thank you.
Okay. So again, so we will give a presentation on functionality, convenience, and sustainability of food packaging. And as I said before, and it's indicated by the cartoon over here, improved food packaging means that you go for a customized food packaging. And I hope by the end of the presentation, this is even much more clear to you. How do we do that in Pack for Food? So we work closely together with the industry, which is over the whole chain of food packaging on the one hand, and with several research institutes focusing on one of the angles of the triangle underneath. With Pack for Food, we look more from a multidisciplinary view, and we look more on the interactions between the different parts of this triangle. Now, what is packaging? For most of the people, packaging is waste. And we are floated by pictures of plastics in the oceans, the plastic soup, and all the others. In a cartoon of a Belgian newspaper, there was one cartoon mentioning that Jesus would walk easier over the water, on the water, because it's now full of plastic. But on the other hand, plastics is also a way, or packaging in general, is a way to show your product, to distinguish your product from other brands in the market. It's also a way to bring your products in a safe way to your customers. But also there in transport packaging, a lot of optimization can still be done, as what is shown in the pictures over here. Now, packaging is also a way to protect the foodstuff and to try to reduce food losses. As you can see that if we protect our food in a better way, so in a more hygienic way, and also now with the COVID-19 crisis, this is for sure one of the items that is still in very much actual. So we can make our products packed in a more hygienic way. And in that sense, we can try to reduce the food losses. So if we look to packaging, we look at from this side. Packaging should be functional, but also convenient. You still want to sell your product to the customers, so you want to have it as convenient as possible for your customer. But if you make innovations on functionality or on convenience with your packaging, the sustainability should always be considered as well. So there is a large interaction between those three pillars that we will discuss in detail in the common presentation. So first, regarding functionality. A consumer always wants to have delicious and healthy foods. And to achieve that, many changes have been performed in the last decades. Food producers use milder preservation technologies, not only sterilization, but also milder preservation technologies. There is a trend to use less additives, so less E numbers on the package. But the consumers also want to have reduction in fat, sugar, and salt content. But of course, these factors, sugar and salt content, they're also there to preserve your food. So if you reduce the amount of sugar and salt or fat in your product, it might have influence on the product stability. There is also a trend towards more globalization. Everybody wants every food product the whole year long in the market, so that aims for more globalization. And all those trends, they lead to extra challenges on the stability of food products. And because of that, packaging becomes even more important if we want to deal with all these challenges as well. Because of the increased importance of packaging, many new developments have been performed in the last decades as well. For example, more use of multi-layer packaging material. In some instances, this is a combination of different materials, such as paperboard, aluminium, and plastics, or combinations of different layers, so that you have one plastic material which is made of different layers. With every layer, each has its own functionality, and together they serve for the complete functionality of your food packaging. So we see that there is an increase of the use of plastic as packaging material, which comes into direct contact with food. So 30 to 40% of all primary packaging is made of plastics. But this implies a diverse range of different plastics. And we see that there was also a trend towards more light packaging, so thinner packaging, but still you want to preserve the good mechanical properties of your packaging material, which is also easy to seal, methods, and even easy to open afterwards. And it still needs to perform very well towards a high gas and water barrier properties, which is needed, particularly for when the packaging is used for vacuum packaging or modified atmosphere packaging, which is a trend of last decades as well, to tackle the challenges that rose by using less additives and so on. If we look to this table, for example, we see here different gas mixtures which can be used in modified atmosphere packaging. If we look closer to sliced cooked ham, for example, this type of food product has a shelf life of approximately 5 days when it's packed under air. When we change in our packaging the air by modified atmosphere, for example, a mixture of CO2 and nitrogen, and particularly the absence of oxygen, we can increase the shelf life to around 4 weeks. But if we use modified atmosphere, we want to be sure that the gas mixture that we bring into the package remain there as long as possible. And therefore, we need packaging material with high barrier capacity, and often this is done by the use of multi-layer packaging. As an example, it can be, for example, a tray made of PET together with a polyethylene sealing layer, which is combined with a top foil consisting of polyamide, polyethylene, and EVOH, where the EVOH is often used as the oxygen barrier material. We could use as an alternative a tray which is only made of PET when we seal it with a layer consisting of an PET combined with an aluminium oxide coating. In that way, we have less different materials used, and probably this will also be better recyclable and so a better or more sustainable alternative. This will be in depth discussed in the second part of this presentation. So by using those multi-layer packaging material, we have some important new challenges. The resources that we are using, whether it will be bio-based materials or fossil-based materials. But another very important challenge is how will we deal with waste treatment? So how can we make sure that stories as the plastic soup and others are resolved? So next to functionality, of course, you also want to have a very convenient packaging. So many innovations have been done on convenience. And like it was shown in the poll, most of you are triggered by an easy opening system or by a reclosable system, or when you give more information on the food product or on the shelf life of the food products. So some of these trends I will highlight in this presentation, of course, due to the time limits. We cannot discuss everything which is on the market, but we pick out a few of the important things happening. Heat resistance is also a trend which is important in that sense that many consumers want to have their package immediately from the shop into the microwave to heat up. It's especially important for ready-to-eat meals. And there are many possibilities. You can just use a monolayer plastic tray, or you can have a combination of cardboard with plastics. And of course, glass is also microwave, or it can also be used in the microwave. It would be even better if the same material could be used in a microwave as well as in a classical oven. And we have seen some trends on that as well, like, for example, the use of fiber-based packaging or the use of crystallized PET, like you can see in that picture. But of course, also there you have to find a way to convince your customer that the plastic can be used in a classic oven, because it's always learned to them that plastic is not cannot be used in a classical oven. So if you want to introduce something new on the market, this asks for some extra effort to pursue your customer. Portion packaging is also one of the convenience trends. So we are not only talking about one portion, but different portions available for each food product. And it's also one of the actions which came out of the EU platform on food losses and food waste as one of the actions that could be made to avoid food losses. I would like to refer to a study which was made in 2015 by the Flemish government, together also in collaboration with Pack for Food, where we did some case studies on the fact that wouldn't it be better to use smaller portions. And you can just go to the link below if you want to see the whole study, so we cannot go through all the details. But in this graph, there is a kind of a summary. So if you look to the y-axis, you see the extra impact on the climate if we would switch from a reference packaging to an alternative packaging. For example, if I take the pink line, which is for the cooked ham, if we have a package of 400 grams sliced cooked ham, and we would like to switch to 2 packages of 200 grams, then it's clear that we have an increase on the climate impact because of the extra packaging that we are introducing to the system. However, if we can have a reduction in food losses due to the fact that we are using 2 separate packages which are packed on a modified atmosphere with a longer shelf life, instead of one, if on the moment that you open it, the protective effect of the gas is lost, we can compensate that extra packaging after 6% less reduction or 6% reduction of food losses, which implies that from a package of 400 grams of sliced cooked ham, if you throw away 1/3 1/3 of one slide, which is a very, very low amount of hemp, you would be more sustainable or more environmental friendly if you would choose for 2 packages of 200 grams and emptying them completely. So it shows that if we would have more portionized packaging, that we can also have a large influence on the environmental impact of food losses. Because we should not forget that the environmental impact of food is much, much higher than the environmental impact of the packaging concept as such. Another trend is the e-commerce, which is very challenging for food because often you have to be able to maintain the cold chain throughout the whole logistic chain and also at the consumer place on the moment that you deliver it there to your consumer. There also have been some developments on that part, but also take into account that when you add extra sensors to monitor, for example, the temperature, that you introduce always extra aspects to your packaging system, which might have an influence on the sustainability or recyclability of your whole packaging concept. This is, for example, an temperature indicator where if there was temperature abuse of your packed food, that the barcode cannot be read anymore by a barcode reader, so that your product cannot be sold afterwards. Another technique that we see appearing a lot is based on near-field communication technology, where you allow to add an extra tag in your package to protect it from fraud or from as an counterfeit item. So we see the trends for a consumer which wants to eat all the time on the go and more snack-based food, and that of course challenges a lot towards food packaging as well. So people want to have a package which is heat resistant, but particularly which is easy to open so that you can open it on the go and you don't need extra equipment to open it anymore. That is reclosable and which is available at the portion that he needs it. So that's what the consumer wants to have from a packaging. Of course, all these trends, they increase the volumes of packaging material in general, but particularly they increase the complexity of the packaging material. So all these innovations and those trends, they ask for more complex packaging material. And this increase in complexity, that gives us again another very important challenges towards waste processing. How can we be sure that if we do innovations on convenience and functionality, that we still take into account what we will do afterwards with the packaging, so that people are not seeing the packaging anymore as waste only, but also as something which is very good for the food product. And of course, we should not forget that new innovations, they should comply also with the food legislation. And so if you have innovations on packaging material, new materials which are introduced on the market, you have to make sure that they are compliant with the legislation. So the migration of different components which might be present or which might be added to the packaging should also be controlled that they are compliant with legislation. So these are for sure some trends which are very linked to sustainability. This is the second part of the presentation, which will be given by my colleague Peter Ragaert. But first, I assume there is some time to discuss on the items on functionality and convenience, which I presented now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. And indeed, we have some time for a few burning questions. So please, if you have questions, do not hesitate to send them via the chat box. But meantime, I have one question for you, Anne, if you agree.
Okay.
So Thus, an extended shelf life of the food products by optimizing the packaging concept implies always a reduction in food losses.
Well, that's a very good question, and it's not always, it's very difficult to get good numbers on that, and it's still something which we are dealing with on research level at the moment, because it is indeed not sure that by prolonging the shelf life that you automatically make sure that you have less food, that you have a reduction in food losses. What we see is that it's a huge difference on very short shelf life products, so the fresh market. If you can achieve there an increase in shelf life by 1 day, it can have a huge impact on food losses, or on the reduction of food loss, because they have a very short shelf life. Of course, products with a mid-long shelf life, it can be different. So everything which has a shelf life of more than 2 weeks or more than 10 days, let's say it like that, then the impact of achieving an extra shelf life of a few days will have less effect on the food losses than for the very fresh products. I hope that answers a little bit the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. We have another question, I think a sensible one. And the question is, what is the right answer to the poll?
I think there is no right answer, to be honest. I was a little bit surprised that people think that heat resistant is not that important for packed food, because consumers like to just take it from the shop and put it immediately, especially for ready-to-eat food, to put it immediately in a microwave or an oven. Think about the lasagna type or those things. Where many research and trends which are now dealt with is for sure easy to open and reclosable. You see many innovations on reclosable again. Of course, the problem that you have there for the modified atmosphere packed products is that the moment that you open it, you lose the protective effect of the gas anyhow, even if the product is reclosable. But it can still help for the drying out of products, for example, which is also, of course, a kind of spoilage. But there's not a right answer for sure.
Okay, thank you, Anne. So we don't have other questions coming in, so I suggest that we move on to the next speaker, which will be Professor Peter Ragaert. But before, we give it up to you, participants, for another poll to answer. So please answer the poll that you have now on your screen. Ten seconds left to answer. Thank you. Okay, so we show. Yeah, so now you see the results of the poll, so thank you very much for participating. So Peter, I hope you take note of these results, and now the floor is for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I must say I did not see the results yet.
Okay, so then no worries, we go back. So do you see the results on your screen, Peter,
Yes.
or not yet?
Yes,
okay,
thank
perfect.
you very much. All right.
Okay, good. So you know the presenter, great.
So I hope that you can see the slides.
Yes, it seems perfectly fine.
All right, so also from my side, a very good day to all of you. So I will continue the presentation with talking about the sustainability of food packaging. And as was also true for the previous poll, also in this poll, there are in fact no good answers. So we have seen that multiple for the multiple possibilities, people have voted. Before going into detail on the poll, I can already tell you that most of the terms that we have seen in the poll will also be discussed in this presentation. And for sure, recyclability and closed loop will be very important aspects in this matter. So when talking about sustainability, we should in fact also talk about circular economy. And in relation to that, I would like to go back a few years in time, where there was a very nice report of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, specifically devoted on plastics. And as we have seen in the previous part of the presentation, plastics are a material which are used a lot for food packaging, about 35 to 40%. And this report stated that plastics in general, three key issues need to be implemented or need to be addressed. First of all, we need to have, that you see on number 1, we need to have more reusing and especially also more recycling of plastics. Secondly, we need to drastically reduce the leakage of plastics into the environment. And thirdly, we should decouple plastics from fossil feedstocks. So in fact, investing more into bio-based plastics. If we look to the EU plastic strategy, which was implemented a few years later, we can see, in fact, a little bit the same topics coming up. And indeed, recycling is a key issue for plastics, and for sure, it is also a key issue for plastic food packaging. What you also see there is another important measure being the curbing of plastic waste. And in fact, this one has already been implemented by the so-called single-use plastics legislation, which was implemented or which was voted last year by the European Commission, and which is giving a list of measures that should be taken to reduce the impact of certain plastics on the environment. Now, another very important aspect in this EU plastic strategy is a very ambitious goal towards recyclability. Namely, all plastic packaging should be either recyclable or reusable by 2030. Now, as we have seen in the previous presentation of Anne, this is quite ambitious because a lot of food packaging at this moment is still multi-layer because it needs to have a very good gas and or water barrier. So industry and also academic institutes are now putting a lot of efforts to make sure that the packaging configuration is changed in such a way that this target, this ambitious target, can be reached. It's not because a material is recyclable that it will also be recycled. And also for that recycling, there is a target. By 2025, more than 50% of the plastic packaging waste should be recycled. Yes. Another important thing as well, and this is in the last sentence of this slide, alternative feedstocks for plastic production should be used where, and this is an important condition, where it can be shown that these are more sustainable compared to the non-renewable, meaning the crude oil-based alternatives. During this part of the presentation, I would like to give you 3 key messages that you have to take into account, in our opinion, when you are talking about sustainability and food packaging. And the first one is already a very important one. You should always consider both the food product and the package together when you talk about sustainability. Because as we have seen in previous presentation, packaging can have a huge impact on the shelf life of food products. Also something that already was tackled a little bit previously is the energy impact of the packaging compared to the energy impact of the whole food chain. There we see that more than half of it, or about half of energy impact, is coming from the food production itself. About 1/3 is coming from the consumption phase, so the phase at the consumer's house, being storage and preparing of the foods. And in fact, only 6.5% is coming from the primary packaging. So although the energy impact is not that high, it has a very huge impact on the shelf life. So whenever you want to change to another packaging configuration, it should not be that by doing that, by changing the packaging, that you have a significant reduction in shelf life. That should always be avoided. A second key message is to go for packaging optimization, which is in fact a responsibility for all the stakeholders in the packaging chain. So, and packaging producers and food producers and so on. Also supported by, for example, federations and the government. This is closely related to eco-design. So eco-design, this slide will give you 5 actions that you can do either alone or in combination to make your packaging more sustainable. For example, you can remove some unnecessary packaging components. Like, for example, in certain cases, you can maybe reduce or remove the shrink sleeve around a bottle or around another type of packaging. Secondly, in terms of a reduction, you could reduce the thickness. Now, a very important remark on that, assume that you are already using a monolayer material, but you say, I want to reduce the thickness so I have lesser weight. Yeah? But then, for example, the mechanical properties become endangered and you have to switch to a multi-layer system in order to have the same mechanical properties. That is, of course, not the goal, because then you're going from a good recyclable material to a less good recyclable material. So you should be, you should not go too much down into thickness. And the same remark a little bit for foam structures, although they are very good in lightweighting, a lot of sorting in companies that are sorting the different waste fractions, they are working on the basis of density. Now, by foaming, you are changing the density, and then maybe some materials will end up in the wrong waste stream. A third important aspect is the aspect of reusing. Think, for example, about reusable PET bottles that we see in different countries. A fourth one is to go for recycling, and this is in fact 2 separate things. First of all, use more recyclable materials. So try to use as much as possible packaging materials which can easily be recycled. The second part in this topic on recycling is also to use recycled content. For example, the usage of a certain amount of recycled PET in PET bottles, which is already in fact described in the single-use plastics legislation. The last category here is renewable. So try to use renewable resources where it is relevant to do so. We have 2 categories there. The first one, for example, are the fiber-based ones. So, for example, paper and cardboard or bagassen. But another one are bioplastics, at least the bio-based plastics. And to, in fact, go a little bit more into detail on bioplastic, I have added 1 slide because sometimes, or maybe often, there is a confusion what a bioplastic is. At this moment, the current state of the definition of bioplastics says that you have to take into account the resources as well as the end of life. So here you see the complete overview, all the possible combinations, and you see that the first 3 belong to or are referred to as bioplastics. So this includes both the ones that are bio-based and compostable, like for example, polylactic acids, or for example, PHB, polyhydroxybutyrate. But these also include as well materials which are not bio-based, so still from crude oil, but compostable. Here you have a nice example, the biodegradable coffee capsules. But also the other way around, materials which are bio-based, but not compostable, like for example, bio-PET or bio-PE. Yeah? used here as an inner and outer coating on cardboard, and bio-PE, for example, produced from sugarcane. Now, what is also interesting to see is that at this moment, the latest data say that about 2.1 million tons of bioplastics are produced in, this is the latest number, so this was produced in 2019. Now, if we go to the last row of this table, being the crude oil-based plastics, then you see the huge difference in production volumes. So here we talk about 350 million tons. And this, of course, has a huge impact on the recyclability options of bioplastics, because recycling is only economically efficient if you have enough material that can be collected. A very interesting, or one of the very interesting projects, because at this moment a lot of projects are going on upscaling bioplastics, and one of them is called GLOPAC, where Pack4Food is one of the partners. It's an H22 project focusing on PHBV, which is closely related to PHB. The interesting part is it's as a resource, agro-food residues are used, and it also combines it with active components as well as with intelligent components. If you want to know more information about it, just enter this YouTube channel where you can see the complete story of GLOPAC. Okay, so now how can we do packaging optimization in practice? First of all, we can use that eco-design matrix. Secondly, and also very important, try to use as much as possible monomaterial solutions, either plastics or paper or metal or glass, but try to minimize the combination of all those materials, because they can give challenges towards recycling. A trend that we see when we specifically look to plastics is that more and more there is a focus on only 3 materials, being the polyolefins, polyethylene, polypropylene, and being PET. So PE and PP mostly for flexible packaging, and PET, let's say, mostly for rigid plastic packaging. How can you apply them? You can apply them either in a single layer, so in a monolayer, or as a coated material. So this one was already shown by Anne in the example of the alternative for the packaging of cooked meat. So PET, Alox PET, but another example is PP, Ceox PP. Both of these inner or these middle layers, these are transparent layers, yes, and they are very thin. We talk here about 0.1 micrometer. So in that sense, it is considered to be recyclable. And there are also some projects running, and in fact Pack4Food is at this moment preparing a project proposal to in fact investigate more thoroughly if indeed these materials are good in recycling. What we also see is with the conventional plastics, like for example EVOH, which is indeed a very important gas barrier, maybe there is a maximum limit that is tolerated in recycling streams. So this is also something under investigation at this moment. The final key message I would like to share with you is that recycling is not in fact the only word that matters when we talk about end of life. If you want to recycle, you need to have collection, you need to have sorting, and you need to have recycling. With regard to the collection, there are also some huge challenges to overcome. And the very important one is that we need as fast as possible to go to a worldwide collection of separate waste streams. This is very important, and there the role of policy is also very important. But at the same time, in fact, we also need maybe also to re-educate the consumers that packaging does not belong in the environment. It's also a critical factor. With regard to sorting, we see that there is a broader range of sorting equipment coming on the market. There is also a lot of research on sorting installations. And just to give you one example, was a very interesting project called the Holy Grail project, which was coordinated by Procter & Gamble together with many other companies. And in this project, the integration of a unique code in packaging materials was invested. For example, to include digital watermarks in the artwork on plastics. To give you an example, if we see this by the naked eye, then by applying digital watermarks, a camera in a sorting facility will see this. Yeah. So even if this package would be cut into small pieces, for example, by a consumer, then still even then it would be detectable by the cameras, first of all. And secondly, you could, for each type of multi-layer, you could have a different unique code so that the separation is happening more efficient. Last, but certainly not least, the quality of the recycling process itself is also very important. I will not go a lot into detail on that, but there are three key issues. First of all, the degree of decontamination that you have to reach to be able to use the recycled material back into, for example, new food contact materials. Secondly, which is also important, mechanical recycling exists already a long time, but now we see more and more projects and already also pilot scale operations for chemical recycling, where you in fact chemically change the structure of the plastics to, for example, to go from the polymer to the monomer and then again make new polymers out of it. And at the same time, remove all the contaminants. The third important aspect is, are we going for a closed loop or are we going for an open loop? Closed loop means, for example, from a PET bottle, you go back to a PET bottle. Open loop means you go to another application. For example, from packaging, you go to a component, for example, for automotive applications. Well, what is very interesting to see nowadays is that a lot of organizations and initiatives, what you can see here on the slide, are really working hard on quality of recycling processes, certificate of recycling processes, making classes, what is recyclable and what not. So we are at this moment really I can say, really at an accelerated speed towards more recycling and more recycled materials. But on the same side, we should also be aware of two important aspects. On the one hand, the food safety of recycled materials. We know that recycled PET is already allowed to be used for food contact materials, but what, for example, with recycled polyethylene and recycled polypropylene? And secondly, what about the environmental impact of all these different recycling strategies? For example, between chemical and mechanical recycling. So in conclusion of this presentation, Anne and me summed up, in fact, from our point of view, challenges in eco-design in relation to food safety. So I will repeat again the slide with the matrix on eco-design, and I will give some, let's say, some considerations or some thoughts about these actions. For example, if you want to remove certain packaging components or you want to reduce the thickness, you should be aware that maybe some of those layers that are initially in the packaging are needed to act as a functional barrier against unacceptable migration, for example, for a certain ink component. So if you reduce or even remove the certain layer, it can have an effect on the functional barrier of a material. In the case of reusing, it's very important that during multiple reuse phases, certain components from the food products can be sorbed into the material, and then in another stage, in a reuse stage, can migrate again to the food product. Plus, hygienic factors also play a crucial role, and you should have a very efficient washing procedure to make sure that by reusing you don't contaminate your packaging material and in fact give the contamination to the consumers. With regard to recycling, there the origin on the one hand and the contamination level on the other hand of food contact materials is a very important aspect. In that sense, we would like to emphasize on the intrinsic differences between PET on the one hand and polyolefins on the other hand. Because polyethylene and polypropylene, intrinsically, they are more susceptible to absorb components. So there, probably, decontamination will be more challenging compared to PET. And another important aspect, of course, what is already known for a couple of years, or many years in fact, is the possible presence of mineral oils in recycled cardboard. And finally, with regard to renewability, there are also some aspects to be taken into account. For example, a fiber-based packaging does not have gas and or water barrier. To give these barrier properties to the fiber-based packaging, you need, for example, to use a special type of coating on the one hand, or you have to add additives on the other hand. Besides the fact that this can hamper the recyclability, this could maybe also have an impact on certain migration. And lastly, bioplastics made from waste streams, probably, or it's possible that some contaminants which are present in the waste stream in the end up in the bioplastic material itself. So this is also a challenge to be taken into account. So by saying that, I think we are on the last slides. So I would like to say thank you, both in the name of Anne and me, for your attention. You have there our contact details in case of further questions. And if there are questions now, I would be very happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for the nice presentation. So for the sake of time, we will have the time now to take one question, if there is one. And don't forget that we will still allocate some minutes at the end of the webinar for a more general question, or if we didn't have the time to answer. So please do not hesitate to send a question if you have one. Yeah, so there is one question, Peter. So except for PET bottles or HDPE bottles, do you know if there are other usage of recycled material in packaging?
If it is used again as food contact material, in fact, no. So the PET is, or I must say, the recycled PET can be used again for food contact materials. For sure, if we look to the recycling, PET as well as HDPE, but also, for example, polypropylene is already recycled. But for example, the recycled polypropylene will not go again for food contact material applications. This will go to other applications like in construction or automotive or other sectors. So in fact, at this moment, it's only our PET that is used again for food contact material.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. So we will now move on to the third speaker, and we go back, we will have some time for other questions at the end. So no other poll this time before the presentation. I give typically the floor to Thomas Buda.
Yes, hello everybody. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to talk to you now. It's now not anymore the full scientific session. It's now the part a little bit to tell you why we're doing those kind of webinars and what kind of other activities are ongoing in the ILSI world, and especially in the packaging material world. As Lucy in the beginning addressed to you, ILSI, the organization, it's clear, so I will not repeat it here, but within this organization we have a task force which is dealing with packaging materials. Currently, I'm chairing this group, and I would tell you a little bit about this group. It's a little bit like advertisement, not fully, but you will see later that you can participate in several ways to the activities of this group. So first of all, what is the task force objective? Before I tell you who is a member, I will tell you what we are doing currently and what is the main focus. And there's a shift in focus, and that's the reason of this webinar as well. On one hand, and that's a classical way, and that's for any kind of packaging material still valid, is that food contact materials have to be safe. You know, there's a huge legislation in the background, not only in Europe, even in the US and China. But for all, the goal is the same. It has to be safe, but the rules, how to demonstrate safety, not in any way absolutely clear, as legislations provides some gaps. And here we discuss a little bit about these topics. I will come back to that. Then the second point, and this is a switch to the two speakers before, is what is the environmental impact. Sustainability is on one hand a topic here, that's also clear, but on the other hand, how consumers have the awareness on packaging. We heard it already, so this is also a topic we like to discuss. Then the third point is definitely to follow new improvements, even on technological side, but even on analytical testing side, and much more important at the end, to assess the safety, what kind of risk assessments can be done, what is the way of risk assessments. I show you examples. And for sure, food packaging becoming more and more interest in the public. We heard it already. The waste problem is always linked to packaging. There are also a lot of advantages. Maybe that's not in the focus. This can be highlighted. But the group or the task force is just covering also this kind of topics. To give you a short impression on what is the strategy of this group, when you look at this slide, you see on the left-hand side, maybe you can read it. So I put it as one of these outputs. It's so-called educative material where we discuss in our task force about hot topics. You see one of these burning topics and still ongoing is the story about the NIAS, the non-intentionally added substances. We published here as a task force a so-called black and white book. It's freely downloadable from the ILSI homepage. Which is summarizing the current knowledge about NIAS and the way how to assess. It's not fully conclusive for sure. You know, those people dealing with NIAS know that they're always showing up new signals, and you have to find a way as a company how to solve the problem of this kind of NIAS. In this series of black and white books, there are many, many more black and white books available. So on materials, like the most recent one is dealing with adhesives. So it's worthwhile to look it in, especially for newcomers and or sometimes also for those guys who are for a long time in that business. Then we see in the middle the literature review. So we have still activities, and I here picked up one of the more recent one. It's published in 2016. It's about nanotechnology for food packaging. It's also a topic discussed. We also did here certain workshops, no, not certain, one workshop, and then a lot of pre-discussion and afterwards discussions. And this is a summary on ongoing activities, on ongoing knowledge in the world of nanotechnology linked to food packaging. Also one of those strategies to be in the focus, to have the most recent information on those kind of topics. And maybe on the right side of this slide, you see also that's not webinars. Webinars now the form in this modern times dealing with viruses. Before and afterwards, hopefully we'll come back to that. That's workshops or even symposia. There's one, the mineral oil workshop from February 2019. I will come back to that in detail, and you'll be aware about the symposium, which typically took place every 4 years. That should have taken place in November this year, but you see it's postponed. I will come back to that as well. So now, who are the members of those task force? You see currently we have 11 industry members, and that's the idea of ILSI, that not only industries there, we have still so-called scientific advisors. We have one for analytical jobs. That's currently Thomas Siemert from the Technical University of Dresden. And then we have one representative from a governmental agency. That's from the Swiss agency here. That's Roger Mövli. He's now retired, but still in that part. Maybe he was one of the guys responsible for the printing ink regulation in Switzerland. We had in between a third advisor, he was dealing more with toxicological aspects. This is now a vacancy, and we look what we can fill up here. Those companies you see on the right side, I will not go through one by one and will not give you the name, but you may know these companies very well, and you know some representatives of that. You see currently 11, so the average membership is between 10 and 16. Now we are currently at 11. That's a good size of dealing with these topics. So just going into more detail, what are the current activities? Maybe you will hear about it, will read about it, even in this year. There's on the left top corner the mineral oil issue. I mentioned it already. We had this workshop. Mineral oil issues are still also hot topics. There are huge discussions. Is it now safe? Is it more dangerous? Where we can find mineral oils. We had this workshop. I will come back to that on the next slide. Then we have a current activity that's called Best Practices for Unknown Migrants from Food Contact Materials. Now it's an expert group where we want to highlight how to analyze food contact materials beside what is given in the legislation. Everybody is aware about this plastic regulation, but if you transfer to other materials, non-plastic, then many stakeholders struggle, and we try to find here a guideline for best practices. The symposium on the left bottom corner, I already mentioned, that's clear. Every 4 years, it's a highly scientific symposia where we're dealing with the most interesting topics. I will show you as well later. And for sure, there are new developments. One we heard already from the two previous speakers about sustainability, the link between sustainable material, but even sustainable material must be safe, and how we want to do that. Maybe that will be one of our next new expert group activities as well. So coming back to this mineral oil issue and the workshop, you've seen in the next slide that we have started in 2019. We are just close before end to summarize not only the presentations. These workshops we typically organize in that way is by invitation. We had a group, I guess it was around 50 people, and discussed some topics, not only here related to food, it was also for cosmetics, it was also for other areas where mineral oils could be present. It's packaging, it's food, it's cosmetics, that's clear. And the aim of the workshop was to identify, on one hand, what is the current knowledge, and that's more important, where are the gaps? And the gaps are obvious. We have a gap in assessing the risk of mineral oils. Besides that, there's still a gap in the analytical chemistry. You know that there's always some publications. Some laboratories report huge amounts of findings, others report very low amount of findings. And then is it now a mineral oil? How we deal with those mineral oils which are mentioned in legislations and allowed, how we can differentiate from, let's say, the bad mineral oils, the crude oils. So this is was discussed. And now in this small group, we are writing the summary, and I can show you the timeline a little bit. It is the finalization is foreseen, if everything runs well, for August this year, that we can provide to an editor, and then the publication can be done. We are more or less finished with our work, and I hope, if everything runs really smoothly, that we may have in the third, fourth quarter of this year a final publication. So we are really on track, and you see here also as well the workshop participants. 50 was very well estimated. We had 29 participants from industry, 15 from academics. That's a typical ratio what we typically try to get, and then some non-industry organization and even some governmental and institution. So I guess I told you everything about this. You can expect there will be. That's a good timing, I guess, because currently there are also some activities ongoing on the Joint Research Center in ISPRA on baby food, on infant food, formula food, to align on analytical, and everybody is awaiting some more opinion from EFSA, and we can fill this gap where we already summarize those results. The new activities are also clear. I mentioned it. Best practice. What is? It's a follow-up of our NIAS activity. I showed you the black and white book. Here we addressed certain gaps as well on the analytical chemistry, as well on the assessment part. Now we try to fill as much as currently possible. Here, the analytical part. What would be a best practice if you want to run NIAS studies? What should you consider? What is feasible? And moreover, what is currently not feasible? Where are the shortenings, or respectively, where is a showstopper? That means when you deal, what you can do when you have too many unknown substances. This is still fully clear. We need some more guidance, and moreover, as already said, we need more guidance here for those materials which are non-plastic. In the bottom, you see a little bit the timeline. We started more or less 1 year ago. In our opinion, we are really good on track. We intended to do the workshop in November. This is not correct. We will postpone as well. We might to link it with the symposia in February 2021. And then we will take up this in this discussion points, the pros and cons from the workshop discussion also into a publication in which way ever, and then share with you as a group as public available document. Last but not least is definitely the key event in the food packaging material, which is organized by this task force. We are just in between. We are a little bit stopped by this virus event. You see it's postponed. You see also now we found a new date. It will be in February 2021. So that means we have to have a deviation from the typical every 4 years timeline. Now we have to go for 5 years, but maybe we see what will be the next. Oops, I was too quick, sorry. The scientific program has also been addressed and announced, so definitely we will dealing with analytical techniques, what's coming new, what can be applied to packaging. There's definitely the non-target screening is definitely a topic. Then for sure, the toxicological prediction. I guess most of you are aware about this tox tree systems and similar programs, and even what kind of other tools we have in hand. And finally, how do you do the assessment? What's new here? Then for sure, the general risk assessment. We expect the most recent insights, what can be done. And that's now the link between the previous talks. What's coming next with the circular economy, sustainability, new functionality, new packaging, within light with the new strategy of the EU to reduce waste, especially on plastic. That's definitely should be covered in that meeting. And most of you, I guess, have already participated in the previous meetings. So for the new activity, only just one slide. I addressed it already briefly and you see on the left side, what is the intention, the functionality of packaging. We want to have an extended shelf life of food, expressed very well before, but then how we can achieve it, what kind of materials are needed. And for sure, in food packaging, we always have an issue on the economics, on the price. You know, packaging should not cost too much, mainly as low as possible, but who is willing to invest money into a new packaging if it's more expensive as the classical one? This is a balance we have to find. And expressed by Peter already is about the sustainable issue, what we're doing with the new materials, maybe plant-based materials with new ingredients, especially if you think about on NIAS, how we deal with those new substances which are not addressed in any database from an analytical point of view, how you want to deal with that. And then again, on the right side of this slide, we have definitely to show what is the safety impact, and everything starts here again with migration. And we have definitely in this slide risk for consumers if you're dealing with new materials, new substances. If you have a lack of knowledge, this should be tackled. And of course, there's a risk for producers. What happens if you invest a lot of money and at the end we see something we cannot solve? And in the bottom line of the right side part of the slide, you see also in the assessment, there is a shift. We do not see any human in the same way. We have to differentiate more and more. We have food more or less for infants. We have food for elderly people. So how we assess this, the body weight expression of limits might be becoming more and more aware. And this also has an influence on the activities. These are some some views on what we discuss in our task force. The task force is typically organized that we have our daily business. We discuss on the ongoing activities, having reports, and typically in the afternoon of our meetings, when we are physically present, we have a so-called scientific part where we invite experts to demonstrate and to highlight what's coming new. And from that, typically we discuss what could be a new expert group within our task force, within the ILSI world, and then we're dealing in the same way as we currently do with the mineral oil and even with the best practice guidance group. This gives you a brief overview on our activities, what we are doing, and if some of you is interested to join, you can join for sure. You can get the feeling if once we're coming back physically. Otherwise, you have to join those kind of webinars, which we are now going to start a little bit just to make visible what are the activities. With these small words, I would stop here and hand over to Lucy again to raise, to answer, to deal, to monitor, question and answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for the presentation. So yeah, we still have we have 5 minutes left for the general questions. So we have received a batch of questions. So I'm going to pick some, and please know all that we will keep all the questions and refer them to the speaker. So if we don't have the time to answer all of them here, which will probably be the case, we will refer to the different speakers, and they may build on answers later on. So I have first questions for Peter. So Peter, you mentioned we already have 55% recycled packaging in 2015. Does this concern all packaging materials and not only plastics and not only food packaging?
No, I think the target is 55% by 2025. So at this in 2015 we had about 40%. This is, if I'm not mistaken, this is all plastic packaging. So not only food packaging, but plastic packaging in general.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Then I have a question for Anne. Anne, which would be for you the balance between food loss and functionality? That might be a bold question.
Yeah, it's a little bit a weird, a strange question. I don't really know what we are aiming for. I think food losses should be reduced anyhow as much as possible. And we should try that to put extra effort in functionality. And I think it's especially important that we put a message to the consumer that the food packaging is not waste and that it really has a purpose. And I think that message should be brought to the public, that they see it not only as a waste, because they forget what was in there and how it protected the food. And we should maybe clarify that more to the consumer.
Thank you very much, Anne. Yeah, another question then for Peter. What will be the main focus in recycling processes for the coming years? Further expansion of mechanical recycling, or putting more focus on chemical recycling?
Yeah, well, that for sure these are two complementary techniques. So it's not that the one is a competitor of the other one. So we will both have mechanical and chemical recycling in the future, and it is foreseen that chemical recycling will be used for those streams which are very difficult in mechanical recycling. So we think that mechanical recycling will be still the major technique that will be used in future, but chemical recycling will advance, especially for those material streams which are very difficult to mechanically recycle.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. So we only have 2 minutes left, and after that the webinar will cut. So there are other very interesting questions that came in. So I reassure the participants that these questions will be redirected to the speakers, and they will come back to you with an answer. So you see that there is a poll now online. We would be very Grateful if you could just take a few seconds to answer this poll before leaving the webinar. And with this, I would like to thank you very much the three speakers again for their time today and for the very nice presentation. And of course, thank you to all participants for their attendance. Enjoy the rest of the day.